Chapter 21 Morgue Camus 2. Camus dropped a bombshell. Are you the thief who stole our ruby mine? The 8-year-old girl's bold question instantly froze the room. First, the servants of the two families stiffened on the spot. Even the mighty Morgue Adolphe stiffened in confusion. Hugo, too, remained silent, looking somewhat dazed. What did I just hear? Is a thought that peeks through his poker face. The Baskervilles' family room is silent, as if no living thing exists. The silence is broken once more by the camouflage. Give it back, ruby mine. The camouflaged creature strides forward and holds out a white palm in front of you. Hugo, meanwhile, was still dumbfounded by the glare. He'd never heard anyone say that to his face before, and even more so when it came from an 8-year-old. Then, Adolphe was the first to realize. Hey, kid, what's with the sudden rudeness? I told you earlier, uncle, that this man stole our ruby mine. Hey, rascal, when did I? Before you got out of the carriage. Starting this month, the number of research rubies paid to me will be reduced, and it's all because of that stupid old mustached thief. This rascal, me, when? If you're asking when, about an hour and 42 minutes ago. Come on, I heard it clearly. Camus gets a little sour. At this point, Adolphe felt a cold sweat break out. He didn't have to look away to realize it. The temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. An unfortunate mustached old man, and a thief. A cold voice came from the front. Hugo turned to look at it, narrowing his eyes. Adolphe pulled out his handkerchief, covered his mouth, and coughed. HMPH. There seems to be a misunderstanding. I'll be sure to clear that up later. What does a puppy know? There is no need to explain to me the problem of the house education in the morgue. Hugo's words were barbed, but he seemed to have already lost his temper. Adolphe turned to the Camus, thinking it was an accusation. Camus, what a rude thing to say to an elderly member of a friendly neighborhood family. But what my uncle said. Even if the servants around you said something bad, you shouldn't pass it on. There are many things in the rumor mill that are inflated well, there are many things that are diminished. Adolphe and the Camus turned to face each other. Suddenly, Hugo was starting to get annoyed with the whole situation. His mind flashed back to Butler Barrymore's report the other day. First report. About the bloodshed with House Morgue at the ruby mines on Red Mountain. We'll have a chance to discuss that soon enough. The morgue will come to me first. The ruby mines were actually an old dispute. On the border between Baskerville and Morgue, the so-called joint security zone, there is a mine that pumps out high-quality rubies. The problem is that the mine's entrance is above ground on Morgue's territory, while the underground vein runs beneath Baskerville's territory. Due to the angle of the vein, there is only one mining route that can be accessed from the surface, and that is from the mine on Morgue's estate. However, mining along this vein will inevitably lead to digging beneath the Baskerville estate. Less than imaginary view of Camus mine greater than. As a result, the morgues have been trying to find a way around this. The most tried and true is to secretly dig a tunnel and mine rubies. However, the Baskervilles, hounds, with their keen sense of smell, picked up on the signs like ghosts and raided the morgue's mines. There was bloodshed on several occasions, but nothing was ever reported in public, so relations between the two families remained good on the surface. Even though it was boiling over on the inside. And so it was that Morgue Adolphe, who had come to discuss the friendly competition today, was actually here to talk about the ruby mines and the bloodshed. So Hugo was prepared for that, too. I want my rubies back. I can't do my research because I don't have enough rubies. Little did he know that an 8-year-old girl would be so insistent. Hugo put his hand to his forehead at her demand. Look at you, Adolphe Governor. What kind of disgrace is this on an official visit? I apologize for this, my lord. But I'm afraid I'm at a loss for words, unless she's saying something very wrong again. What? It's the right thing to say, isn't it, though it's crude coming from a child's mouth. Hugo and Adolphe's gazes met in unison. Hugo tried to channel the swordmaster's superhuman aura to pressure his intestines, but he was distracted by the Camus that had stepped directly in front of. He tries to slow his momentum down enough to make the Camus back off. What do you think you're doing to a child, the sword star of the empire persecuting an 8-year-old girl? That's when Adolphe's Pinson comes in. Adolphe wrapped Camus in a cloak. And Hugo with a scowl on his face. It's embarrassing for an adult to argue with an 8-year-old, but this Adolphe guy keeps trying to exploit her innocence for political purposes. It was very annoying for Hugo. Should we reignite the ruby mine issue, which we've been silent about? For Baskerville, it's a matter of pride, and for Morgue, it's a matter of business. In the first place, rubies are more important to the Morgue than to Baskerville, as they are used as a key ingredient in magical experiments. Hugo is a closed-minded man who doesn't like to interact with other families, so he just wants to keep his mind off the ruby veins. Training hounds and navigating the Black Mountains with enemies was enough to give him a headache, and he didn't want to get into trouble with a bunch of kids who wanted to play magic with a red stone that was only used for women's jewelry. Give me back my ruby mine. Without the rubies from there, it's hard for me to continue my studies. Camus, you're talking about grown-ups, I can't even stand to listen to the conversation between the girl named Camus and the guy named Adolphe. No matter how you look at it, this is a political performance. But since the other party is a child, I can't say anything, and I can only boil inside. Even if the iron-blooded swordsman, who is in a position to recognize things, asks me to stop. Right then, a voice made Hugo's ears perk up. Don't they teach you not to covet what belongs to others in Morgue? A voice as cheerful and innocent as an 8-year-old camel. It was 8-year-old Vikier. Chapter 22 Morgue Camus 3. I guess the Morgue don't teach you not to envy what belongs to others. Vikier's words as he entered the chamber changed the mood once again. Adolphe's expression, which had been subtly amused, hardened. Camus also glares at Vikier with an angry expression. Hugo, on the other hand, wore the same subtle expression that Adolphe had been wearing all this time. A showdown between two self-respecting geniuses. The once-in-100-years supernovae of the two sides stare at each other in the center of the room. Vikier studied Morgue Camus in front of him. Red hair, sparkling ruby eyes, a sharp nose, chubby cheeks, a few freckles, and an innocent expression. Is this the Morgue Camus I know? Her childhood face and her adult face overlap. If you take away the baby chub from that face, take away the haggardness, and add a few more years to it, you'll see a face that Vikier knows. The Iron-Blooded Empress of House Morgue. She was known as the undisputed genius of Morgue, a magical family that has produced many of the greatest mages in history. In addition to her magical prowess, she also possessed a stunning beauty that captivated the hearts of every man in her social circle, and she was skilled at using her beauty to her advantage. With a figure that could go in one place and come out another, Camus could wrap even the highest-ranking royalty in a skirt, making her the embodiment of power. He did not hesitate to marry for convenience several times, and each time the prestige of the House of Morgue greatly increased. In her prime, when she ruled as the Lord Chancellor, she slaughtered countless demons and barbarians in the Red and Black Mountains, skewering them and burning them with fire to establish a border of blood and ashes. In her later years, she was referred to by the enormous title of Heavenly Empress. Dude, what did you just say? But that's in the distant future. For now, he's just an 8-year-old kid. Camus asked Vikier in an angry voice. Why is the ruby mine yours? It's ours. Adolphe laughed and Hugo frowned at the sight. But Vikier dismissed Camus' protests with a single word. You must have traveled a long way to smoke this. Hugo laughed and Adolphe frowned at the sight. Meanwhile, the Camus gritted his teeth, realizing that his weapon of choice was a child. So he changed his demeanor and reverted to his logical self. A chill ran through the girl's body. Dropping her innocent expression, she spoke in a cold voice. Since you seem to dislike talking, let me logically explain why this ruby mine belongs to Morgue. Camus took out a map and analyzed the mine's topography. The only surface mines that can produce rubies are within our family, which means that the Baskervilles can't mine them on their own anyway, and it makes good business sense for the Baskervilles to give us the mining rights to the ruby ore beneath the estate in exchange for a percentage of the estate's rent. She is the only child of a prominent mage family who has never been overcome by logic before. Her logic would make even grown men flinch, much less people her own age. But Camus' pride was soon challenged. The mineral ruby is commonly used in magic. There is no reason for Baskerville to mind them, and it would be a great tragedy for House Morgue to have a fool in our midst who would open up our lands for rent. Camus stared blankly at Vicier's argument. For the first time in his life, he had met someone whose logic didn't make sense to him, and it was someone his own age. Weren't most men his age dull and stupid? Camus couldn't help but feel a little confused. Meanwhile, Camus and Vicier's arguments were not those of mere 8-year-olds. Both had a firm grasp on the logic of the Morgues and Baskervilles, and Adolphe and Hugo could not help but watch with interest. Camus narrowed his eyes. Well, that's curious. I've never met anyone like you before. I don't know anyone my age who can talk to me. I go outside a lot. Excuse me, I've been outside a lot already, if you mean inspecting the estate. What makes you think you know anything about my life? Actually, I have no interest in your life, the problem is Ruby. If you want to change the subject, do it alone. Vicier's stoic demeanor is replaced by a glint in Camus' eye. You're the first guy I've ever met who's been this indifferent to me. Is the classic, cliched, yet timeless sentiment. I just did that. She's a direct descendant of House Morgue, and she's been the recipient of countless favors. Where else would she go to receive such a blatant pat on the back from someone her own age? Moreover, this is a stage he cannot afford to lose, an argument he cannot afford to lose. My pride has never been diminished. Camus asked pointedly. The mine is in Morgue territory, so the mining rights belong to Morgue. The vein runs beneath Baskerville's territory, so the mining rights belong to Baskerville. I thought Baskerville was not interested in rubies. That's right, they only care about their territory, which is why they don't want you to come in. Is that hard to understand? Morgue is interested in the ruby, and Baskerville is interested in the territory. There's no way they can agree on anything. The adults standing behind the children didn't see eye to eye with them, so the dispute was far from resolved. Then, Camus' ruby eyes sparkled. Very well, I'll make sure you know where the ruby ore belongs. Camus picked up a brush and ink from his desk. He began to draw on the floor. A large circle centered on Vicier, and a larger circle centered on Camus. The two circles touched each other. Then, Camus made a big wall of paper to separate the two circles. The wall of paper was so large that 2 servants had to hold it up on each side. Then Camus on the other side of the paper wall said, "This is your land, and this is my land." Vicier made no reply. Only Hugo and Adolphe watched with interest as the 2 8-year-olds argued. Then, boom, the wall of paper was torn apart. Camus tore through the paper wall and stuck his arm through. A white, chubby arm broke through the paper wall and entered Vicier's land. The camel asked Vicier, "Now, whose arm is this?" Adolphe's face lit up when he heard the answer. Hugo's face crumpled. The camel's analogy was clear. Even though his arm had crossed the boundary, he still owned it, and so did the ruby vein. It was the wisdom of his ancestors, who, long ago, when the persimmons on their persimmon tree grew over their neighbor's fence, went to claim them. But, who does this arm belong to? Vicier is not a very likable character. A strong grip that doesn't look like it belongs to an 8-year-old grabs a white, chubby forearm. Before Camus can squeal, Vicier is the first to speak. "He's mine now." Instantly, an immense sense of power radiates from Vicier. It wasn't the kind of power that comes from drawing on mana, but the kind of power that comes from existence itself. It was an overwhelming force that only seasoned hunters from the age of destruction could exude. It was enough to make even Adolphe and Hugo cringe for a moment. Not to mention Camus, who was only 8 years old. What? Camus tried to swat his hand away, but to no avail. Boom. The wall of paper ripped open, and Vicier yanked on Camus' arm. The distance between them was now close enough for their noses to touch. For a moment, Camus' gaze wavered. It's the first time he's ever seen another child this close. Not of the same gender, but of the opposite one. On the other side of the wall, the face of the first boy outside of his clan was incredibly familiar and yet strange at the same time. Dark hair, dark eyes, white skin. And a body odor unlike any he'd ever smelled before, and a breath that was almost too quiet to be heard. For a moment, Camus felt a jolt that seemed to knock the wind out of him. It was a very foreign experience for the 8-year-old, who hadn't had much experience wandering outside of the clan. He looks cute, Camus thought, momentarily forgetting the gravity of the situation. Is that why he made the mistake of blushing and backing away from an important meeting? My, why am I yours? Woo, you're hilarious. It's hard to tell if the attack landed because he's looking down at the floor. Adolphe and Hugo watched the scene with subtle expressions. Humph, hum, hum. Important diplomatic matters mixed with the tender sensibilities of 8-year-olds made for a very awkward atmosphere that was neither theirs nor mine. Just then, Vicier's words broke the ice. Who says you're mine? At the same time, Vicier's grip tightened. Camus was pulled firmly back towards Vicier. Before she could scream in surprise, Vicier's other hand moved. Your arm is mine. As he spoke, Vicier plucked something from his waistband like lightning. It was a sharpened dagger. It was a shocking sight that made Camus, Adolphe, and even the usually poker-faced Hugo hiccup. Chapter 23 Morgue Camus 4. What a shocking sight. Hiccups. Even Hugo Les Baskervilles, the patriarch of the Iron-Blade family, had hiccups. Vicier's actions were just as sudden. Ah! Camus closed his eyes and screamed. No wonder, his arm was about to be cut off. She was screaming and crying at a crisis she had never faced before. Even his uncle, Adolphe, had never seen her cry like this before. Stop that. Adolphe unconsciously raised his mana. The mana of a sixth circle master surged out, pressuring Vicier. But, Sasek. As if he had anticipated it, Vicier immediately let go of Camus' arm and fell backwards. Ah, uncle, he's got my arm. Camus cried, running to bury his face in the hem of Adolphe's cloak. Adolphe stared at Vicier in disbelief, not even angry, before turning his attention to Hugo. Go away, what are you doing? Hugo ignored Adolphe's protests. He simply tilted his head at an angle and looked down at Vicier. Son, he said, and Vicier answered politely. Yes, father. Your prank just now was a bit too much, I'm afraid. I apologize. It is a common prank among the brothers of the family. After speaking, Vicier took the tip of the dagger in his hand and bent it. The knife bent so easily. It's a fake sword, made of rubber. When Adolphe saw it, he exclaimed in disbelief. No, what kind of a toy is this? You've never seen a boy play with a toy sword before, and we Baskervillians play with them from the time they're a year old. It was only at Hugo's words, which seemed to surprise him, that Adolphe opened his eyes and saw the sword in Vicier's hand. It was a crude rubber knife, obviously a fake, the sort of thing that even the average child in the world would play with. My mistake was that I didn't recognize the quality of the knife in Vicier's momentary burst of strength. Seeing Adolphe, who was known for his meticulousness and composure, stumble in surprise gave Hugo a bit of satisfaction. He quickly forgot his own surprise. Now, I've thought of something about the ruby mine. Maybe the morgue will like it. Quote. So let's just get this friendly competition over with. Hugo's blatant attempt to sell out. Adolphe, looking dumbfounded, tried to protest in Moorish. Quote. Blah, blah, crying. That bastard, I'm not gonna let him get away with it, you'll see. Unfortunately, he didn't have time for that as he was busy petting Camus, who was blowing his nose against his cloak and whimpering. Thus, an important meeting between the two families was ridiculously interrupted by an 8-year-old child's argument. Magic and the sword are at odds with each other in normal times, but in times of crisis they are a good complement to each other and save the country. In keeping with the former emperor's beliefs, Morgue the Mage and Baskerville the Iron-Blade hold an annual friendly tournament. Children from the ages of 8 to 15 gather to test their skills against one another. By tradition, it is the 15-year-olds who compete in the most intense and spectacular battles with swords and magic, as opposed to the 8-year-olds who compete in theory and mana sensitivity. But, for this year's friendly competition, all eyes were elsewhere. The 8-year-old class usually gets little attention. The two youngsters standing there were the main protagonists of the day. Vicier van Baskerville, of the Iron-Blooded House Baskerville. Morgue Camus of House Morgue, a master mage. At the Morgue's initiative, the 8-year-olds were moved to the side of the field next to the 15-year-old class where the real action was taking place. They would be fighting just like the 15-year-olds. The contrast between the nonchalant Vicier and the venomous Camus was quite striking. Brace yourself, boy. Quote. Quote. You're not going to get any breaks once you're in the ring. Quote. Quote. Say something. Vikir could only yawn. The more he does so, the more he stomps his foot in frustration. Finally, the bell rang, signaling the start of the real competition. And with that, the match began. Yeah! A loud cheer rang out. Camus immediately drew up his mana and charged at Vikir. A performance that draws all of its power from the start. It's a great way to get a quick start, but in the long run, it's not a good strategy because it reveals all of your cards. However, Camus' talent was indeed impressive. Quadra-casting. He casts 4 spells at the same time, when most people can't even cast 2 in a row. Even though they were one-circle spells, Fireball, Ice Sphere, Thunder Ring, and Mud Wall, each one of them would be difficult for a 15-year-old in Morg's household. To perform 4 of them simultaneously is a talent beyond imagination. It was indeed a genius that could only be found once in 100 years, even in the prestigious Morgue. Boom! Fireballs, ice balls, and lightning bolts the size of a child's fist hit the ground. They actually hurt a little, but only slightly, and Vikir ducked just enough to avoid them. It's pretty spectacular, but I think you'd be better off focusing on just one spell for now. What business is it of yours, you magical ignoramus? Camus was chasing after Vikir, diligently controlling his 3 offensive magics. There was a hint of determination to feed him a shot no matter what. But, hook! Vikir dodged a barrage more like 3 child's fists of spells, and instead moved closer to Camus. And then, huck! Vikir kicked the mud wall that was protecting Camus and shattered it. Camus swallowed hard. It was too close to call in its offensive magic. The base of the mud wall collapsed, and Vikir's face came into view. Camus felt his heart pounding in his chest. We're down. Camus' eyes rolled back in his head as Vikir's flying palm blocked his vision. Then, a searing pain shot across his forehead. Crack! Bam! Camus pulled back, wiping the tears from his eyes, and looked up. Quote. Question mark quote. Her forehead burned, but that was all. Vikir didn't do anything, just flicked his finger and made a small bump on Camus' forehead. You bastard. Are you kidding me? Quote. Quote. Go. Camus cancelled one of the 3 offensive spells he had cast earlier. Woodshed. Mud wall. A wall of mud was created in 2 layers, covering Camus. Now there's a double wall. You can't get through this. The problem is, with the double wall, Camus herself can't see out of it. But, the 2 layers of mud are as easy to break through as a sheet of paper. It was Vikir's hand that broke through the wall and stretched out in front of Camus' face. Who does this hand belong to? The hand that broke through Camus' wall and into her space. Vikir's fingers moved quickly while Camus was stunned and unable to find the words to answer. The answer is, turn off the stronger one. Another snap. Another tear leaked from Camus' eye. He was hit again. Swat after swat hit the exact same spot, creating a second, smaller bump. To make matters worse, Vikir's hand slipped away immediately after the second blow. It wasn't like he was delivering a killer blow, it was just a quick slap. Who does this thing dare to play with me? 8 years old, a genius girl who's spent her entire life growing up like a forbidden jade leaf. Camus screamed at the top of her lungs, unable to contain her rising tantrum. With that, she cancelled all of her offensive spells and formed 4 walls of mud to surround herself. Now, how about this? No one can break through this, not even you. Camus didn't seem to mind that his vision had gone completely dark. In fact, he was glad that he didn't have to show his hands rubbing his forehead and his sullen expression. Quote. Quote. He paused for a moment, wondering if that little bastard Vikir couldn't break through the 4 walls. Camus smiled victoriously. Ho, loser. They say you can't even penetrate walls because you're a dwarf dung bag. Come all the way here, you idiot. But still no answer. Some time passed. Trapped in the mud dome, Camus rubbed his forehead and thought to herself. But this won't let me get out, will it? What should I do? My vision is completely blocked and I can't see what's going on outside. I can't even try to do something different, because I'm stuck with 4 layers of mud. I thought, maybe I can cut a hole and peek out. With a little effort, Camus cut a small hole in the mud wall. He stuck his face through the hole to look out. Bam! Bikir's hand swooped in like a ghost and delivered a 3rd blow to Camus' forehead. 3 lumps. With 3 small lumps on the same spot on her forehead, Camus writhed in pain and anger. She lifted her burning eyes and quickly cancelled all 4 layers of mud walls. As the mud wall collapsed, she could see the face of the insignificant bastard in the distance. I'm going to kill him. Ah! Camus cried. He was too angry and frustrated to think about his dignity. So he threw away all his defensive spells and cast 4 offensive spells at the same time. A firepower that would have been impossible for a 15-year-old to pull off. Meanwhile, Vikir faced Camus' fury and thought, What should I do? If you want to kill her, you can snap her neck in 0.1 seconds. But that's not the problem right now. Dealing with children is painful. You don't know where to stop and where to start. This is especially true for Vikir, who has spent his entire life on the battlefield. He was too young to be appeased by the younger members of House Morgue. Eventually, Vikir made a judgment call. Morgue's problems are Morgue's problems. It's always cleaner to do things without getting your hands dirty. Boom. A quick glance to the side reveals an intense battle in progress. A nameless 15-year-old Baskerville and a 15-year-old Morgue were engaged in a fierce battle of swordsmanship and magic. Both are so focused that they don't realize that someone is approaching them. The 15-year-old Morgue seems to be practicing a powerful fire explosion spell, and a loud explosion is emanating from the arena. Swoosh! Vikir ducked back and stood as close as he could to the border of the neighboring arena. A very angry Camus followed closely behind him. Well, if there's any more, the arbiters will step in. Vikir shifted slightly, and Camus followed him relentlessly, not wanting to let go. And then, boom, an explosion, and gasps. Ouch, it's Camus. Oh my god, Ms. Camus. No, it's... Vikir began to see the picture he wanted. Chapter 24. Morgue Camus 5. Camus summoned fire and ice, lightning and boulders, and began pounding the ground. Vikir narrowly avoided all of them, gradually moving closer and closer to the border with the other side of the performance hall. You bastard, don't run away, stick to me. Camus shouted, trembling. It seemed to regain some of the confidence it had lost when it was forced to close the distance. However, the 3 bumps on his forehead made her look anything but cute to others. Vikir raised his palm and tapped his forehead 3 times as he moved to avoid the magic. The smirk on Vikir's face was enough to make Camus lose his cool. I'm not going to let you off easy, you little bastard, not even if you beg. As Camus took his final leap, Vikir stopped running. And that's when Vikir's clever calculations paid off. Boom. The 15-year-old Baskerville and Morgue, who had been fighting in the next room, clashed fiercely. Swords broke and magic burst, sending shards flying in all directions. The 15-year-old Morgue used a massive fire spell that shredded and scattered flames in all directions. Even Vikir and Camus were caught in its path. Boom. An explosion. And cries of horror. Ouch. It's Camus. Oh my god, Camus. No, it's... The mages watching the tournament from the sidelines were stunned. But even if it was an accident, it was a fairly minor one. The flames from the nearby training grounds didn't pose much of a threat. However, Gah! Camus screamed as he looked down to see that most of the hem of his clothes had been burned away. As she hastily stripped off her still sizzling clothes, she became an underwear breeze in the middle of the training grounds. Luckily, the flames, smoke, and dust around her hadn't yet revealed her nakedness to others, but, was sure a gust of wind would do it in a few seconds. Thinking the damage was minor, the guardians outside didn't barge in. Only a few worried voices could be heard. Oh, no, not at this rate. The teary, snotty face is not enough, even the underwear-like body is exposed in front of everyone. What an embarrassment. What can I do, what can I do, what can I do? If I show this kind of behavior, I will lose my dignity in the family. I had once been kicked out of the house, naked, for talking back to my mother, so the trauma was even more intense. Nu, can someone come? Camus crouched down, covering his bare skin with his hands as best he could. Worried about the terrible humiliation that would come in a few seconds. But then, just then, flutter. Camus felt the fabric wrapped around his entire body. It was heavy, but soft fabric. Raising his head, he saw a black blood-red robe covering his entire body. "Wear that," Vikier said. He stood in a blur of underwear in front of Camus. Camus stuttered. You, huh? At that, Vikier shrugged. It's a privilege of children to be naked for all to see and not have their honor tarnished. The idea that it's a disgrace to show what's underneath the clothes is rampant among both genders, but those are the stories of adults. Little kids running around naked is not a big deal or an emotional issue or a flaw. Kids can be kids. Of course, the child may have a different opinion, but at least that's what Vikier thought. After helping Camus, Vikier got up from his spot. Then, Camus pointed at Vikier's face and stuttered. "Yeah, you were bleeding, you were bleeding." Vikier raised his hand and wiped the blood from his forehead. Apparently, when the magic had been dispersed, the shards of the sword had been dispersed as well. It wasn't a fatal wound, but it was blood anyway, and in a fight between 8-year-olds, blood is the difference between victory and defeat. And now, whirring, a gust of wind blows in, sweeping away the dust and smoke from the stage. It reveals a dazed Camus, covered in Baskerville's training clothes, and a bleeding, naked Vikier. It's unclear what happened in the dirt, but everyone could tell that the mood between them was no longer one for fighting. The look in Camus' eyes, in particular, tells everyone that the battle is completely over. That dazed gaze was like a blank slate. Meanwhile, the other Baskervilles looked at the naked youngster, who stood tall and proud. "Ho ho, did you lose to the morgue woman, or did you win? I can't tell. By the way, the young one is very good. He must have been favored by the river Styx. Of course, all those lean muscles all over his body. You must be keeping up with your training schedule." The fight between the 8-year-olds, which had been impressive in many ways, ended somewhat sourly with the loss of Camus. After the friendly competition was over, Hugo pulled Vikier aside in the corner of the arena. As they walked to the chamber, Hugo turned to Vikier and asked, "How was the battle with the young lady from Morgue?" "It was interesting. It reminded me of the purpose of the event. A battle with a wizard is quite different from a battle between swordsmen. I'll keep learning." Hugo and Vikier chatting away. If anyone else in the family had seen this, they would have been quite surprised. Hugo wasn't the type to talk to his children like this. And Vikier was also feeling quite out of place in this moment. What is this? Was he always like this? I don't actually remember much of Hugo as a child. He was always cold, strict, and cruel. Rumor has it that the reason he was so screwed up was due to the bitter loss of his first wife and eldest daughter. Well, that's none of my business now. While Vikier mulled this over in his mind, Hugo asked his next question in a blunt tone. "What do you think of the ruby mine?" Hugo's core question, a continuation of the argument from before the friendly competition. At the time, Camus' logic had been, we can't mine the rubies in Baskerville anyway, so we'll take the mining rights for pennies on the dollar, which was also Morgue's demand. Baskerville, then, has no choice but to give a realistic answer. Turning to Hugo, who was looking at him with some anticipation, Vikier replied, "I think it's better to give it away." Hugo's eyes widened slightly at that. "You're giving away the mining rights to the ruby mine?" "Yes. On what basis?" Hugo asked again, and Vikier answered without hesitation. "The Red and Black Mountains, through which the ruby mines flow, are downstream of the Red and Black Mountains. A little further up, powerful demons and barbarians abound, and I know this because I recently crossed the border into the Forbidden Zone on a practical assessment," Vikier said, remembering the arrow marks in Cerberus' side. Meanwhile, Hugo's expression was brightening, albeit subtly. So, and the Baskervilles have made it a point to expand their borders by opening up those backwoods. If we can use the Morgue to our advantage, we can minimize the damage to the Baskervilles' frontier." Hugo's eyes glowed blue at that. That's the answer. He understood Vikier's point. If the ruby mining rights were given away, the morgue would put a significant number of men downstream in the Red and Black Mountains. Baskerville would then be able to open up the wilderness next to them and drive any demons or barbarians that lived there back to morgue. When you take territory from demons or barbarians, you must dry up their seeds so that the natives will never seek revenge. Cutting root. I must kill all the demons and barbarians in the land, as well as chase down and kill all those who escape, and then I can take full possession of the land. Return to the land. This is because it prevents the departed from gaining strength and returning to take revenge. But it's a long and painful process to completely exterminate fleeing prey. So Hugo decided to clear the land and drive all the fleeing demons and barbarians to Morg's ruby mines. Ha ha ha, the rubies will be even redder with Morg's blood. You will regret entering our territory, child of Raspain. Hugo was pleased with Vikir's answer. The morgue had gotten the ruby, Baskerville had gotten the territory, and the meeting had ended cordially. Very well done. A ploy that fits my plan perfectly, Hugo said, stroking Vikir's head. Vikir thought. Of course it was. The plan came from your head in the first place. Vikir knew this well, for before the regression, he had served as a hound to drive demons and barbarians toward the morgue. For now, however, he must simply lower his eyes and answer politely. Still, I think we should carefully monitor the movements of any morgue who have entered our territory, just in case. There is no need to worry about that. I have been slowly increasing the number of hounds I have sent there for some time now. Hugo's answer came as a surprise. Not that the plan was surprising, but that he'd bothered to tell Vikir about it. Vikir was stunned to realize that Hugo's gaze had softened to the color of tanned leather. Just as they were about to enter the chamber. My lord, a voice called out to Hugo from behind. Where he turned, Morg Adolf stood. And beside him, he saw Camus, whose eyes were still red. The way it was clutching at the hem of his uncle's cloak, staring at him, seemed oddly familiar. Hugo narrowed his eyes. Acting Lord Morg, what is it, and do you still have business? I have one very important business to attend to. Well, let's go inside and finish it. Hugo opened the door and stepped into the chamber. Adolf followed him in and sat down on the couch. Camus still didn't say anything. He merely glanced at Vikir before entering, then dropped his gaze to the floor and walked away. He still wore the blood robe Vikir had given him after the duel, wrapped tightly around his body. Adolf said to Hugo, the truth is, Morg has been putting a lot of thought into resolving the ruby mine issue amicably, and the rent for the manor is just one of many issues. So what, the price of me opening up the lands? What about the marriage pact? Hugo's brow furrowed slightly at Adolf's offhand remark. But it wasn't a frown. Hugo leaned forward and asked. Marriage pact? Yes. A marriage between a man and a woman from Morgan Baskerville. Opening up the lands to another family for money might not look good, so let's paint a good picture by creating a marriage relationship. But a marriage between Morg and Baskerville, known for their long-standing rivalry, is an awkward and outrageous proposition. Hugo chuckled at the suggestion, which he hadn't even considered. I see. And who does it link to whom? How about this one's eldest daughter and that one's eldest son? Adolf turned his head to look at Camus. Just then, Camus' head snapped up in surprise. It's a sign of the times. He's my nephew, he said, but he's a great kid. Beauty for beauty, intelligence for intelligence, strength for strength, nothing is missing, and I think she would make a good companion for the little sunshine of Baskerville. But Hugo didn't care about any of that. HMPH. My firstborn is 20 this year. I thought there was quite a difference in age. 8 and 20. It's only a 17-year difference, isn't it? That's easily overcome. Adolf was 40 years old this year, wasn't he? Do you think he could meet a 17-year-old? Adolf suddenly became very quiet. Hugo threw up his hands. Besides, my eldest son is already engaged to be married. Is that so, and when? It's a prenatal marriage. You don't even know. Hugo's answer gave Adolf a troubled look. Just then, suddenly, Camus raised his head and shouted, I will not marry anyone weaker than my mother. Her tone was quite confident. Adolf and Hugo's gazes turned to her. They hadn't even asked for the child's wishes. Adolf smiled gently and stroked the camel's head. My dear, if you refuse to marry someone weaker than your mother, you will be a virgin for most of your life. Or you'll have to find a man with a huge age gap. I'm looking at possibilities, and I don't want a huge age gap. I like people my own age or younger, and there were a lot of people my age in the audience earlier. Adolphe shrugged at Camus' comment, as if he had nothing to say. Then Hugo looked at Camus with a hint of irritation. Kid, this isn't a buffet. I know, and I'm not interested in picking and choosing. With that, Camus looks up and stares off into the distance. There, standing in the distance, was Victor. Hugo is stroking his chin with his hand when he realizes where Camus' gaze is headed. No, you. Adolphe jumped up and covered the Camus' eyes. He has the surname of Van, not less, and you're a dragon from the creek, after all. Adolphe whispers in Camus' ear, but Hugo, who is now a superhuman, can't help but hear the whispers. That's true, but it's kind of pissing me off. Hugo mumbles a little to himself. Then he turns to Victor, who is standing next to him. Well, when it comes to marriage, it's what you think that counts. What about you, my son? Without hesitation, Victor answered. If you say so, I will obey. It was a loyal answer. Hugo laughed heartily at that, and Adolphe's face contorted in bewilderment. If you ask me to do it, marriage is not a timely process. What a disrespectful way to treat Morg's only child. Hugo was even openly scratching Adolphe's insides. In Baskerville, there's no such thing as direct lineage. Inferior things come from the family name of Les, and superior things come from the family name of Van. Is that what the Lord would say, my friend? Adolphe looked down at Victor with a smile on his face. But the smile was cold and hard. I didn't get a good look at you in the training grounds earlier, do you mind if I take a good look at you? Victor finally managed to look up at Adolphe, who stood before him. Sixth Circle Master. A powerhouse at the very top of the Mage House morgue. A delegate to the Great House and a master of words who is often the go-to person for diplomatic and political matters. And known as a terrible nephew fool. Victor is alone, mulling over the pre-regression character data. Adolphe leaned closer and whispered in Victor's ear. Child, I don't mean for you to hear this, but to be the husband of our Camus, you must be of a certain age. It's just a matter of opinion within the family, and personally, I don't think you're even close to being the right man for Baskerville. The words were spoken with a hint of bravado. As is characteristic of politicians, Hugo's temper is quite high for a man who had just taken a jab at Camus. But, under Adolphe's pressure, Victor doesn't move an inch, just stands there with an expressionless face. In fact, Adolphe's brow furrows. Why don't you answer me? Are you listening to me? Finally, Victor's mouth opened. You said it wasn't for me to hear, so I didn't listen. Chapter 25 Morgue Camus 6. You said it wasn't for me to hear, so I didn't listen after that. At those words, Hugo hastily covered the corner of his mouth with his hand. Though expressionless from the hand up, it was a gesture that hid a smile from anyone who saw it. Camus also stares at him with wide eyes. Who. Only Adolphe's forehead is covered in blood. He straightened his bent back to meet Victor's eye and looked back at Hugo. My lord, will you allow me to speak with this child for a few moments? It was highly unusual for a delegate of House Morgue, much less a top member of the power, to take such an undue interest in a mere 8-year-old. And Hugo didn't have much to say in response to his opponent's overreaction. What are you doing with that kid? Is the mad star of the Empire persecuting an 8-year-old boy? Hugo hadn't forgotten what he'd heard before, and he was returning the favor. But Adolphe was stubborn. Isn't this a child who may one day be my niece's husband, and I'm asking you this as an uncle, not as the head of Morgue's delegation. Oh, uncle, it's not like that. Leave my nephew alone. This uncle will take care of it. We all have to see this once in a while. Adolphe says with a stern look on his face as Camus speaks up. He nudges Hugo with a sly glance, a nuanced way of asking him to save face. Hugo threw up his hands, thinking that it had been a long time since he'd had to deal with the morgue. Do as you please. Victor readily accepted Adolphe's request. Morg Adolf was an absolute powerhouse who had been difficult to deal with even before his regression. At the age of 40, he is already the acting head of the family at official events. The chance to experience a little bit of Adolf's power was a good one. I'm sure Hugo thought so too, which is why he allowed me to attend. After the annual ceremony, everyone cleared out of the ballroom. Vikir and Adolf stood facing each other in a large field. The observers were Hugo Les Baskerville and Mort Camus. They stood at a distance from each other, looking at the two men in the center of the arena. Adolf said, "Child of Baskerville, I am about to test your qualities, so show me all that you are." Vikir nodded and thought of something else. "If I show you all of me, you'll faint." What would happen if I faced him at his pre-regression peak? 50% in ambush and assassination, 10% in hand-to-hand combat. But I don't have all of my pre-regression strength back, and I don't have to fight to the best of my ability. I just need to fulfill Adolf's expectations in moderation. Let's see what confidence can do. It's said that masters can tell each other's skill by shaking hands. Vikir thought he'd take this opportunity to see how Morg stacks up against the top players. Then Adolf said, "Child, I give you a handicap." He raised his hand and swung it toward the ground. Boom. Mud rose up from the ground and swirled around to form the shape of a jar. Boom. The flames from Adolf's hand solidified the clay. Next, the jar began to fill with water spontaneously. A seemingly simple combination of earth, fire, and water, three magical elements all at once. Just right. Adolf snapped his fingers, and the jar of water slowly rose into the air and landed on top of Adolf's head. Carrying the jar of water, Adolf looked down at Vikir and said, "I will fight you with this jar full of water on my head. If you can get even one drop of water to flow from the jar on my head, you win. In other words, go for it." Vikir gripped his short sword and took up his stance. Adolf crossed his arms and stared at Vikir. And then, Tadic. Vikir made the first move. Seeing Vikir charging straight at him, Camus cried out in alarm. You can't run straight at my uncle." Hearing this, Adolf looks back at Camus with a very regretful expression. "Nephew, I don't want you to tell him that." At the same time, a transparent barrier forms in front of Adolf's eyes. Pow! Vikir is knocked back against the wall as he charges. Shield magic is best when dealing with swordsmen. Even an aura sword will be hard-pressed to stop them. Adolf's words were true. Adolf, in particular, was a master of shield magic, able to create shields of various sizes, thicknesses, and shapes to suit the time and place. Earlier, he had created a shield just the right size to cover Vikir's torso to minimize the waste of mana. However, Vikir is no slouch either. Ta-da! Vikir used the backward bouncing momentum to close the distance, then immediately turned and moved to the side. At the same time, bam, bam, Vikir kicked a few cobblestones in the opposite direction of his travels. The stones flew straight toward the water jar. It's not a good idea to aim for the jug. Without even looking in the direction the rocks were coming from, Adolf used his hands to create a shield. He summoned another, smaller shield for the incoming Vikir. Vikir bounced back from another blow. Adolf opened his mouth. "From now on, I will attack as well." Before he can finish his sentence, fire spears are summoned. Fire bolts descend rapidly through the air, each one powerful enough to pierce the solid soil of the smokefield and create a deep pit. Seeing this, Camus cried out, "Uncle, that's not fair, you didn't even use that kind of magic against me. You were my nephew. Whose side are you on now?" Adolf looked bitterly disappointed, but Vikir was frantically dodging the flying fire spears. That's it. Vikir's familiarity with Adolf's power hadn't changed much since then. This level was already familiar. I see how to deal with him. The seasoned battle experience before the regression, and the innocent face of a child afterward. The combination of the two can catch your opponent off guard and lead to unexpected results. Or kill him. A ghastly thought crossed my mind, but I didn't need to make a big deal out of it. Hugo's eyes were on me, and I needed to get this right. Vikir moved as if chased by flames. Vikir quickly drew his sword and swung at Adolf. But not a chance. Adolf's shield blocks Vikir's blade. Bang, 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 bang. Vikir swung his sword again, but it too was blocked by the shield. Adolf grumbled. Same thing 100 times. Your sword can't pierce the shield. But Vikir did not give up. Boom. The sword swings. Boom. And it hits the shield. Vikir kept repeating the same move, and Adolf kept blocking the sword with the same shield. Boom, 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 boom. The sword was hitting the same place over and over again without missing a beat. Vikir's sword flew with machine-like precision, the same trajectory repeated countless times. At this point, even Adolf realized that something was wrong. Ho. Vikir's blade was hitting the same spot on the shield over and over again. The shield was getting worn down by the blade. Especially since it was constantly hitting only one part, the magical fatigue level of that part was already quite high. Ha 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 ha, you're trying to pierce the shield by hitting the same spot over and over again, what a bold idea. I can't help but praise your concentration and swordsmanship for being able to target the same spot over and over again without missing a beat. However, Adolf's eyes immediately turn cold. But, that's like trying to hit a boulder with an egg, and you're trying to do that against the durability of my shield and the durability of your sword. He was right. Bam, bam. Vikir's sword struck Adolf's shield for the 10th time. Pow. Vikir's sword finally shatters and breaks. Vikir was forced to retrieve his broken sword and step back. Hugo stroked his chin and remained speechless, while Camus looked disappointed. Adolf turned to Vikir, who had retreated into the distance. I admire your stubbornness and willingness to stick to one position, but it's something you have to do while watching your opponent. You're a fine young man, but you're far from qualified to be my nephew's HUSB. Adolf was about to end the line with an admonition. But, he immediately felt the top of his head grow damp and stopped speaking. What is it? When Adolf realized that something was wrong. Gurgling. A trickle of water dampened his hair and began to run down his face. Quote. Dazed, Adolf looks up and sees a jar of water leaking from his head. Boom. The shard of Vikir's sword that broke and bounced off earlier had stuck into the side of the jar, causing it to leak water. Adolf, soaked from the crown of his head to his chin and even to the nape of his neck, looked on in a daze. Vikir walked up to him and said, "You're full to the brim." He was referring to the water in the jar, of course. Chapter 26 The Graduate 1. The number of people being born in Baskerville was still high, and the number of people dying was still high. The Styx River flowed, the current pushing back the tide. 7 years had passed since the day of the duel of the two 8-year-olds. This instructor can be an angel or a devil, depending on what you do. A short bearded young hound was shouting in a raspy voice. His name is Staffordshire Baskerville. 35 years old. He's a veteran knight of the graduator class. An outsider, a commoner, not even given the middle name of Van, let alone La, but an upstanding man who had managed to cleanse his bloodline by taking the surname of Baskerville due to his outstanding qualities and straightforward heart. In particular, his stabbing fang swordsmanship is said to have reached the level of the 4-teeth Baskervilles. 4 teeth, drawn to perfection. If he's this good, he should be able to lead and teach the younger Baskervilles right now. Now, for the final exercise, practice makes perfect, as I'm sure you're all well aware. Staffordshire glanced at the 15 and 16-year-old Baskervilles in front of him. All looked tired and weary. But the chill and poison in their eyes is growing stronger and stronger. The young Baskervilles here, all 15 or 16 years old, are swordsmen who have mastered the Sword Expert Junior class, Baskerville 1-tooth. Staffordshire checked the trainees' form, then turned his head again. In the center of the training grounds that surrounded them, a huge bear stood on 2 paws. Weighing in at 800 kilograms and standing 3 meters tall, there was something else unusual about this giant bear. It has 2 sharply curved horns on top of its head. Less than oxbear, greater than. Danger rating, A. Size, 5 meters. Found in Ridge 7, Red and Black Mountains. A very large bear with 2 massive horns. A carnivorous bear, the strongest terrestrial predator, and a perfect killing machine, it is considered the strongest and pinnacle of the Red and Black Mountains 7th Ridge ecosystem. A demonic creature with few natural enemies other than its own kind. The bear carries 2 massive, curved buffalo horns on its head. Its entire body is covered in thick muscle, fat, and bristly fur. Grr. The beast currently on the loose in the performance hall appears to be a sub-adult, not yet fully grown. It's also been in a cage for a long time, so its nutrition is not very good. But that also means it's aggressive and nervous. Staffordshire swung his sword to intimidate Oxbear, while encouraging the younger Baskervilles behind him. Now, we just need to do what we've been practicing on the demon's corpse. Last time we practiced on Oxbear's corpse, you all know how tough his hide is, how tight his muscles are, and which parts of his body contain which entrails. The meek-looking Staffordshire was a different man when he stood before Oxbear. His eyes glowed with life, and the aura emanating from the tip of his sword was like a giant's grip. Staffordshire exuded such a terrifying aura that it overwhelmed Oxbear, but he never attacked. Because it's not his place. Next, Oxbear charged. He charged like a buffalo with his two horns. The young Baskervilles fight back, each according to their own preferences. Some scattered to the left and right to dodge, while others swung their swords in front of them. Bang! Those who dodge live, and those who meet head-on fall. Staffordshire continued. If someone stronger than you is coming at you head-on, it's natural to dodge. But don't dodge by putting too much distance between you and them, but sneak around them to the side and get in a little attack. The young hound's advice continues. The young hound's eyes glowed, sucking them in like water. Don't be greedy and go for the kill right from the start. It's more likely to be countered. Instead, go for the center of gravity of the body, in this case the right hind leg, so that it's not as fast to move or react. The young hounds followed their handler's instructions and repeatedly attacked the bear's legs as it stood on its 2 feet. Continuing to attack only his hind legs, Oxbear was left with a widening wound that left him with little use of one leg. The menacing antler lunge was sealed. By this time, the young Baskervilles had bared their teeth in earnest. They were now hunting dogs who could take care of themselves without the guidance of the Staffordshire. Baskerville 1 meal. More than 30 teeth bared, tearing at Oxbear's body. The most aggressive were the triplets, highbrow, middlebrow, and lowbrow. Quack, quack, quack. They hunted the bear as if they were the boss. They were the boss of the pack, physically shoving aside any cocky siblings who tried to get ahead of them, or any dumb siblings who fell behind their peers. And then, thud, Oxbear fell to the ground. Well done. Staffordshire raised his sword and stepped toward Oxbear's body. Thwack. The bear's stomach split open, spilling guts and flesh. After 4 periods of training, lunchtime came naturally. Staffordshire impromptu distributed Oxbear's guts and flesh to the young hounds. Steaming red chunks of meat. The young Baskervilles chewed and gulped down the raw, squeamish flesh. Staffordshire said to the trainees as they ate, "Now, eat and listen. As of this hour, 3.5 years of basic training, 3.5 years of practical training are over. Congratulations on your graduation. 7 years of training had turned these snotty little boys into young warriors." Everyone here was now a young prodigy who could not only load a sword with mana, but also draw a perfect set of teeth. But Staffordshire said they were just getting started. Practicing with captured demons is really just a tutorial that I wouldn't even call realistic, and now you have to create and build your own experience. The advice of an old hound who has seen it all is always worth heeding. The wild beasts of the Red and Black Mountains are not only fit and strong, but also cunning and calm in nature, unlike those that have been left in cages for a long time. Even I can't compete with the stubborn and old individuals I sometimes see. That's true of the Oxbear I just killed. Facing a full-grown wild Oxbear's horns, followed by a series of front paws and head bites, is dangerous enough for any grader. Controlled variables, a safe environment, and set rules. And a wild, unexplored place where you can't survive on your training alone. That's where these young hounds have to go from here. The young Baskervilles already knew that. Staffordshire gestured to the countless scars across his face. You'll have to go through the hell that lies ahead on your own. Either overcome it with the blood you were born with, or overcome it with your own experience. I have nothing more to say to you, that's all. With a brief Colossus salute, he relinquished his position as leader. The young Baskervilles put down the flesh and guts they'd been tearing up for a moment. Then they steeled themselves for the next 21 months of unexplored territory. Once Staffordshire was out of sight, they gathered in small groups and began to make small talk. Hey, where did you get your knighthood? First degree, Doberman. 2, a pit bull. And a Rottweiler. Oh, none of those overlap with me. I like the Knights of the Wolfhound, then the Shepherds and the Bull Mastiffs. The 7 Knights of Baskerville. Each order was created and operated for a different purpose: vigilance, search, protection, assassination, suppression, and all-out warfare. But the best of the bunch was the Order of the Wolfhound, which symbolized the power of the house. I want to join the Wolfhounds. But you can't just go there because you want to, you have to be kicked out. I'm going to be realistic and apply for the Dobermans. That's practically the only place you can get in, besides the Wolfhounds. If I join the Doberman Knights, I'll have to watch the castle walls for the rest of my life, and I can't stand that. I'd rather be a pit bull knight, always on the battlefield. The children murmured, and naturally, their eyes slowly began to converge on a single point. Quote. But where is he going to go? That was the common question of all the kids here. Even the triplets, who had been the most active in this oxbear hunt, had put down their morsels of meat and were now watching. Vikier van Baskerville, a child from outside the family, rumored to be Hugo's illegitimate son. He hadn't joined the oxbear hunt, but sat alone and still in a remote part of the country. And at Vikier's feet, a large oxbear lies dead. A much larger one than the one that had just been killed by the combined efforts of over 30 children. The young Baskervilles stare at Vikier, awe in their eyes. Is he really 15 years old like us? How does he catch an oxbear by himself? From what I've heard, he's already a sword expert. He's also drawn 3 teeth. Crazy, he can use the 3 Baskerville form. That makes him almost like a leader hound. Worship of the powerful is common in any group, but it's even more pronounced in the Baskerville family. But the truth is, Vikier doesn't pay much attention to the rumors. Advanced Sword Expert. Advanced Sword Expert means that the aura at the tip of a sword has become so dense that it can pass between gas and liquid. The children of Les Baskervilles usually reach this stage between the ages of 20 and 25, but Vikier is rumored to have achieved it by the age of 15. But Vikier's true hidden power was beyond that of a graduator intermediate. It was a full 2 levels above Sword Expert, and comparable to Staffordshire, who had been his leader hound. Moreover, considering the protection of the Styx River and the power of the demonic sword Beelzebub, his actual combat power would be even stronger than this. If the world knew, it would be shaken to its core. Single quote. Currently, I've mastered 5 Baskerville forms. In terms of swordsmanship alone, he has already surpassed the level before the regression. He had never mastered a sword technique above the 4th level in his previous life. Because of this, it would take him a little longer than he had originally planned to become a perfect graduator intermediate. Meanwhile, Vikier closed his eyes and recalled the oxbear he had just killed. It had been a close call, but the animal had been weakened by years in captivity, and he'd been able to kill it with his hidden skills. Vikier's mind raced as he tried to figure out how good he was now, and how much he'd lost in comparison to his pre-regression skills. He couldn't be bothered with the chatter of the Baskervilles, day pups, who were just getting their teeth. Then, a topic of conversation caught the attention of even Vikier, who was lost in thought. A young Baskerville had casually mentioned something. Quote. So, in our line, he's going to the academy. The academy, Colossio. An imperial compulsory school where the 7 houses of the empire send their young heirs to be educated. Due to the academy's capacity limitations, the number of students admitted is limited to a small number from each family. Naturally, only the most elite young people from each family are allowed to attend, which is something Vikier was interested in. Of course, he doesn't have the greed for fame or the desire for education that the other kids do. It's a chance to get away from Hugo and improve my skills. Of course, there's more to it than that. Like paying back a debt from a previous life, or gaining control of a hidden artifact. As Vikier ponders his next move, "Young master," a voice called to him from behind. An old voice, but still strong. A warm, gentle demeanor. Butler John Barrymore came to stand at Vikier's side. He was one of the few people Vikier had ever felt sorry for in his previous life, and Vikier had come to trust him. Then Butler Barrymore leaned closer to Vikier and whispered, "My lord wants to see you." Hugo Les Baskervilles. It was always unusual for him to seek out his children. At Vikier's puzzled look, Barrymore smirked and continued, "I believe he has decided on your position." Chapter 27 The Graduate 2. It's been a long time since I've been in Hugo's office, and it still smells cold and dingy. Dust from old books, stale cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and a faint scent of blood. Like a seasoned hound, Vikier reads the atmosphere through scent. Then a middle-aged man sitting behind the desk, in a swivel chair, staring out the window, turned and faced Vikier. Hugo Les Baskerville, the iron-blooded patriarch of House Baskerville. His face bore a slight resemblance to the face of Hugo in Vikier's last memory before his regression. Suddenly, Vikier noticed a single, relatively recent scar across the bridge of Hugo's nose. It had been there before the regression, but Vikier had no idea how it had come to be, and his eyes lit up. "Greetings." Hugo answered briefly, then nodded. Vikier continued his casual conversation in a nonchalant tone. When Vikier asked about the scar on the bridge of his nose, Hugo shrugged it off as nothing. "I was struck by an arrow while slaying the enemy and the barbarians of the Black Mountains." Vikier was a little surprised. The mighty Hugo Baskerville could be wounded by an arrow. There was no way a man of Hugo's stature as a swordmaster could have been struck by a blind arrow. There must have been a sniper targeting him. Hugo smirked. "There's a woman who can shoot a bow. Did you catch her?" "No, I didn't. But I did carve one of those same things into the fox thing's face." A swordsman of Hugo's caliber would have been able to scatter the aura of the blade's tip to intercept even the most distant foe. Hugo touched the bridge of his nose for a moment, feeling the scar across the bridge of his nose still throbbing. He paused for a moment, then spoke. "Anyway, congratulations on completing your training." "Thank you. From now on, it's harder." At Hugo's words, Vikier nodded. As Guardian Knight Staffordshire Baskerville had told her at the end of her training, the real work begins now. 3.5 years of basic training to learn the theory of warfare, build physical strength, and develop an eye for opposition. Another 3.5 years of practical training, including combat training against real demons and humans, and wilderness survival skills. But the enemies they're about to face, and the deep waters of the Black Mountains, are a hell that will negate everything they've learned about survival. You can only survive if you have a good bloodline, or if you are willing to die for it. For the next 21 months, we'll be working with the enemy to open up the Black Mountains. Vikier thought as he recalled his pre-regression memories. If things had gone according to plan, he would have become an apprentice knight of the Pit Bull Knights at this point and been sent to the Red and Black Mountains, crossing countless lines of fire over the next 21 months. He would have been thrown into the fray like a hunting dog to be used a few times and then discarded. But Hugo has a rather unexpected proposal for Vikier. You should be a member of the House of Representatives. It was a surprise indeed. Hugo would train Vikier in the ways of the court. Of course, the Baskervilles are a family of seasoned warriors, so being a bard doesn't mean you can't fight. However, it is not uncommon for younger Baskervillians, especially those who are particularly gifted and skilled, to take the path of an unaffiliated warrior after serving as an officer. Hugo's nemesis and second son were on the same path. A man must be strong. As with the sword, so with power. Vikier nodded at Hugo's words. While the other expendables were dying on the battlefield, the elites were learning about politics and administration, both within the family and outside. And when an elderly elite finally draws his sword and goes into battle, he'll have the seasoned expendables to assist him. The elite may start out a bit late, but he or she will build up his or her skills and accomplishments, and grow into an even bigger giant with the political and administrative experience he or she has learned. And only the elite can learn more than the Baskerville Five. This is why consumables are not taught higher-level swordsmanship beyond Baskerville 5. It's so that the elites, who are late to the game, can catch up to the expendable hounds with little effort. It's the same reason why the higher-ups in the country don't teach the people to write. As you say, Vikier bowed respectfully. He'd meant to move away from Hugo's side, but instead he'd grown closer. It didn't matter much, though, as he hadn't yet shown much in the way of hidden skills, and this was good for Vikir in more ways than one, as it allowed him to get closer to the center of power. Hugo explained Vikir's new position as an MP simply. The House of Representatives assists the Baskervilles in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the House of Baskerville's territory, as well as attracting business for the House and running the affairs of the House, in short. Successful House members are promoted to senator, which allows them to deal with matters outside of the House, which is not something Vikir is currently interested in. Drac. Hugo opened a drawer and pulled out a few papers. Deacon Barrymore quickly stood beside him with his seal and sigil. Your new position as Deputy Magistrate of the City of Underdog. Underdog City, Vikir knew well. The busiest town in the vast territory ruled by the Baskervilles. No, it was more of a metropolis than a town. The Archon is the one who oversees the legislative and judicial affairs of the city, and the Deputy Archon is responsible for assisting the Archon in various ways. Vikir looked at his appointment letter and said, "So it's about making and enforcing laws." "Yes, and there are currently vacancies for both the Archon and Deputy Archon positions." There was a reason why the positions of one magistrate and several deputy magistrates were all vacant. Originally, Underdog City's ruler was Hugo's second son, and the second son's relatives who took the Baskerville surname were the deputy rulers. But now Hugo's second son was long gone, and the deputy magistrates who were supposed to take his place had been fired or suspended en masse for bribery. And Hugo intends to hand over all the powers and duties of those vacant posts to Vikir. It's a city that's become a state-free zone. Can you do a good job? Vikir nodded. Deputy magistracies are usually held by men in their 30s, but occasionally a prodigy, a genius among geniuses, will hold the position in their early 20s. And it was likely that these young elites would one day take on important positions representing their families. For example, they would be admitted to the academy. And after 4 years of studying at the academy, they would return to the family and immediately become a magistrate. An elite course for the elite. What Hugo proposed to Vikir was an equally unconventional appointment. "I think you're giving me too much power. And a great deal of responsibility," Hugo said with a dry laugh. "Your achievements are at least 10 years ahead of the children who are considered geniuses within the family, so I will treat you accordingly." Treatment includes both rights and duties. The greater the power, the heavier the duty. Or, to put it another way, the heavier the task, the greater the power. "I will endeavor to live up to my lord's expectations." Hugo nodded, wordlessly. And then, the land. A piece of paper was stamped with Hugo's seal. With that, Vikir became the deputy magistrate, the de facto magistrate, of a metropolitan underdog with a population of 500,000. This is good, Vikir thought. If I use the power of the deputy magistrate well, I can train my skills much more safely than if I go straight into the fray. His hidden teeth and claws would be sharpened. And then, Vikir opened his mouth. "My lord, question mark quote." Hugo looked up. There was a glimmer of warmth in his eyes that had been absent since the end of the mission. Vikir seized on the threadbare warmth. "I'd like to tell you about the ruby mine in Morgawa. 7 years ago, an 8-year-old Vikir had done something daring against Morg's envoys that had made Hugo's stomach turn. Hugo had been so pleased that he had promised Vikir a reward, though he hadn't asked for exactly what it was. And now, Vikir was asking for a reward for his behavior in a very clear way. "I was wondering if I could borrow." Hugo looked a little troubled at that. Yes, I did, and I made it clear then that I would reward you. You said you'd tell me if you wanted something. You don't have to listen if you don't want to." Hugo's thick eyebrows arched at that. "It won't be difficult." He nodded, then pulled another piece of paper from a drawer and stamped it with his lordship's seal. "I trust you won't do anything stupid. Son." No matter how many times I hear him say, "Son," I never get used to it. And in truth, Vikir was more surprised by Hugo's willingness to grant his request than by the title. "I would never have dared to ask you for a favor before. Perhaps things will go more smoothly than I thought." Stepping out of the guest room, Vikir walked down the long hallway. Behind him, Deacon Barrymore smiled gently. "Master." "Yes. My lord is very fond of you." Vikir remained silent, not saying anything. Then Deacon Barrymore spoke. I can see that you're not going to put him in the field right away, but you're going to give him the position of de facto ruler. Isn't that the art of imperialism? You're going to use him big and heavy. Literally, if you're going to raise a hound to be used and discarded, you should send it out into the battlefield right now to die. While the hounds are seasoned by their encounters with death, their would-be masters are armed with ideas and knowledge from a safe place. And from this foothold, the hounds leap to the heights of the untouchable. In the end, the lower life cannot overcome the higher, even if it dies and rebirths. Neither by words nor by martial arts. It's a bitter pill to swallow for Vikier, who is feeling it all over again. That's if I do a good job as deputy magistrate. I'm sure you'll do just fine, master, and if you do anything more than passably well there, you'll be the next one to enter the academy. Deacon Barrymore had noticed that Vikier was interested in the academy as well. Although he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Meanwhile, Vikier's mind was racing with the policies and exploits of the famous bureaucrats he had seen and heard about before his regression. The letter of appointment to the position of deputy magistrate, stamped with the seal of Hugo Le Baskerville, Lord of Iron-Blooded Baskerville, slipped deep into the pocket of Vikier's arm. You'll have to prove yourself quickly. There were many ways to prove oneself and move up the ranks in a short period of time. Vikier chose the quickest and most obvious one. Chapter 28 Special Laws of Vikier 1. Vikier made his way to the city hall in the center of Underdog City. He made his way across the buildings that housed the many employees, and found his office at the far end. The new deputy magistrate is coming today, so make sure the place is clean. Who will he be? I don't care who it is, I just hope it's someone who's a little more hands-on. Hey, what do you expect? I heard he's 15. Employees sweep, mop, and clean throughout the building. On a high wall hung a banner welcoming Vikier van Baskerville, the new deputy archon and acting archon. Vikier walked nonchalantly past the workers. He was supposed to start tomorrow, so they didn't pay much attention to him. Is this your kid? Did the staff bring him here? Honey, you're not supposed to be here. It's temporarily closed because the High King is coming tomorrow. You can go out there and play, there's a playground outside for the staff kids. A few employees blocked Vikier's path. Move over. When Vikier sees the letter of appointment in his hand, he ducks his head in confusion. You're early for work, Mr. President. The staff falls flat on their faces, looking as if they've seen a ghost. Vikier walks into the office and sits down in the overstuffed chair. His first order, as soon as he assumed his position as de facto ruler, was order number 1. Colonize the liquor and the women. Baskerville, Chihuahua. For 10 years now, he'd been the clerk of the town hall here, and he felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. I can't believe I've been drinking since day 1. And he's only 15 years old. After all of his predecessors were suspended for bribery, it's hard not to feel sick to the stomach when a new kid comes in and starts getting promiscuous. What an asshole, and in a sacred workplace, too. Chihuahua Baskerville rubbed his forehead with his hand. He was from outside the clan and had been given the surname Baskerville in recognition of his administrative prowess. Although he had to settle for the title of secretary because he didn't have a middle name of Les, or Le, or Van, he was working hard. Man, I've got a lot of work to do, and then some rascal comes rolling in and says. At least I had some hope that Baskerville was from the inside. I hadn't gotten my hopes up when the 15-year-old kid said he was coming, but now they were dashed. Even now, the sound of clinking glasses, giggling women, and singing clowns could be heard outside the window. Baskerville, the Chihuahua, twitched his goatee nervously and threw down his filing cabinet. Yeah, damn it, it takes a damned underdog cigar to wake me up and just. But he couldn't get his complaint out. Creak. The door to his office opened, revealing a boy. Vikier van Baskerville, the new archon. He was finally officially in the office. You're the head of the office. The Chihuahua Baskerville gave Vikier a mock polite look. Yes, sir. I'm Chihuahua Baskerville. You don't have a middle name. The Chihuahua's expression hardened slightly at Vikier's words. To not even have a middle name for a half-breed or illegitimate child was to be from outside the family. Usually, those brought in from the outside were indentured servants within the Baskervilles for 3 years before being given the Baskerville surname and formally admitted into the family, which was exactly what Staffordshire and Chihuahua had done. Strictly speaking, they are not blood relatives, but users. The new deputies would always use this as a way to discriminate against the newcomers. So Chihuahua had to put up with the bitterness of this atmosphere. But, good. Vikir's assessment came as a surprise. As the Chihuahua's eyes widened, Vikir recalled a memory from the past. Chihuahua Baskerville, yes, I recognize the name. He's a skinny guy, and his goatee gives him the image of a lowly Ganeshan, but he's surprisingly kind-hearted. And because he was an outsider, he faced a lot of discrimination, and his accomplishments were often labeled as those of a ruler or deputy ruler. This was something that Vikir identified with. Vikir also doesn't trust his own family members, and outsiders with proven credentials are much more trustworthy. I took a quick look at your bio on the way in. You're from Underdog City, right? Yes, I'm a native, born and raised here. Then you know the lay of the land better than I, a newcomer to the city. That's right. The Chihuahua hesitated to answer, then realized he shouldn't have. He knew from experience that this would be followed by a string of, if you know so much, why don't you do it? If you're so good, why are you working for me? How dare you try to boss me around? Why don't you just do it all? And so on. But once again, Vikir's answer was unexpected. I know the hard work of the people who actually run on the field, and I have no intention of interfering with their principles, customs, or styles. The Chihuahua went blank at that. He hadn't expected to hear these words from someone from within the family. Naturally, he was expecting a sense of privilege and to tear down all the old customs as bad. Well, at least you don't seem to be a carcinogenic character. If it didn't do any good, at least it wouldn't do any harm. While the Chihuahua breathed a sigh of relief, Vikir flipped through the papers on his desk. Parallax. The sound of the papers being flipped, and the Chihuahua didn't expect Vikir to be looking at them. But to his surprise, Vikir was looking at all of them carefully. And then, closing the papers, Vikir said, I don't see anything wrong with the legislative system, but there are a lot of oddities in the judicial system. What? You've seen all that, the bird? Chihuahua asked in amazement. The papers here are hundreds of pages long. But Vikir already knew a lot about the Underdog City. It was one of the more prominent cities in the pre-reversion spy and planting operations. There are illegal gambling houses, brothels, slave auctions, and all sorts of private banking going on in the territory. The underground economy of Underdog City is probably quite substantial. The Chihuahua's eyes narrowed. Vikir continued. Perhaps these are the factors that led to the departure of the previous deputy magistrates. It will not be easy to break the cycle without some sort of compromise. What do you think, you Underdog native? Vikir asks outright, and the Chihuahua can only twitch his lips. Not only has Vikir grasped all these documents and gotten to the heart of Underdog City's core issues, but he's also consulted with her on the most important issues without looking down on her as a subordinate from the outside. And he came to me on his first day, even a day in advance. At this sudden turn of events, which defied common sense, the Chihuahua could only stammer, unable to answer. Vikir smirks. It's actually quite easy to take down an underground economy, you just have to get to the heart of the matter, hidden amongst the dotty remnants of lawlessness. In a previous life, Vikir had a long history of battling illegal organizations in the Underdog City. As a result, he knew almost everything about who was committing what crimes and where they were hiding. He even knew the locations and identities of the bureaucrats who were taking bribes. It's worth it, I thought, to look through the black books left over from the pre-regression busting of the illegal organizations. It's the job of a deputy magistrate to make and enforce laws. Vikir got right to work. I honor all the laws that have come before. I'm just adding one new law to them. A new law, yes. It won't be very long, a few lines at most. Vikir's eyes lit up. Within a week, we will have dried up the seeds of Underdog City's underground economy. Short and bold, he finished and floated off to the academy. There was a war on crime to come, and some laws that would be necessary. And to create and enforce these laws, we need a rationale. Hearing Vikir murmur, the Chihuahua felt herself slowly being drawn into the strange aura the boy exuded. She couldn't help but ask, "What's the point? Why do you want to fight lawlessness? I'm still young, and above all, am I not a rookie who will be joining the force tomorrow?" Vikir looked back at the Chihuahua and smirked. "Isn't the least you could do is give me a warning?" Quote. The Chihuahua shakes his head, unable to understand Vikir's words. But Vikir doesn't bother to explain further. Instead, he strokes his chin as he looks out the window of the ruler's office and down at the bar. Pour, drink. The gathering to welcome the new deputy Archon, Vikir, is already large. In fact, the party was going strong even without him. And Vikir, who should be the center of attention, is sitting in the High Council chambers right now, planning tomorrow's events. Quote. Yes. You gotta shit to catch shit flies. Vikir's voice, muttering in a low voice, had an edge to it that didn't belong to a 15-year-old. And the Chihuahua thought, maybe this encounter with the boy in front of him would change his entire life. Chapter 29 Special Laws of Vikir 2. Dortmeier Street, the main street of the metropolitan underdog. A notice on a large banner hung in the center of the crowded street. It was unusual for the ruling government to post a notice here, but the content of the announcement itself was nothing new. Less than Article 00, Section 0 of the Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville. Law on the prohibition of illegal trafficking in persons. Penalty, death greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Section 0. Law prohibiting illegal gambling. Penalty, wrist amputation greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Paragraph 0. Law on the prohibition of illegal private banking. Penalty, eyeball removal greater than. Less than Article 00, Paragraph 0 of the Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville. Law on the prohibition of illegal brothels. Criminalization, facial tattooing greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Section 0. Law against illegal lobbying. Sentence, deportation from the territory greater than. All laws that were originally there. They are quite strict because they are the laws of a territory controlled by Iron-Blooded Baskerville. But few citizens trusted them to be upheld. Chet, laws only favor those with power. It's all the same to the big guys. Isn't it a world where the law-abiding are the losers? The law is far away, the fist is closer. The citizens of Underdog City, which has an unusually high crime rate, scoff at the Manahan law. They've seen it all before, how the bureaucrats from Baskerville, the fat cats, and the second and third generations of Sadoga collude to get their way. The moneyed, the powerful, and the mighty make it work in their favor, interpret it, enforce it, and if you're broke, poor, and powerless, there's nothing you can do about it. All they can do is cry, drink, blame themselves for their bad luck, or take out their anger on those less fortunate and weaker than them. Underdog citizens accustomed to this fate are naturally distrustful of the law. Well, at least the previous deputy magistrates were busted for bribery, so maybe it will make a difference. Of course not, the new deputy from Baskerville is 15 years old. What? 15 is the same age as my youngest daughter. What's a girl like that supposed to do? That's what I'm saying. Pretty soon she'll be roasting in the lobby of the local lords. Public opinion was not very favorable to the new deputy. Some cite his age, some cite his unwritten laws, some cite his scattered gangs, and some cite the myriad temptations that await the novice bureaucrat. Just then, hey, guys, come on down to the main square. Big news. The already bustling place became even more bustling. People rushed to the square to see what's going on. Thousands and thousands of people. And in the middle of it all, as if a meteorite had fallen, there is an empty spot. A circular space where no one has set foot. In the center of it all, a cold-faced boy stands with a stick. It was Vikir van Baskerville, the newest deputy magistrate, 15 years old. Vikir held a stick in his hand. 70 centimeters long. A small stake weighing about 3 kilograms. People crowded around to see the new deputy magistrate, but they never got close. That's because of the mountainous energy emanating from the boy's tiny body. Behind this untouchable aura, several government officials stood nervously. They were employees of the executive office, including Chihuahua Baskerville. Oh, my God, what is he going to do? He's been standing there since the crack of dawn, do you understand? There's a lot of people here, wow. The citizens and officials alike had no idea what Vikyr was trying to do here. Then, listen. Seeing that the audience was more or less gathered, Vikyr spoke. I am the new deputy magistrate. The murmurs around him grew louder. He's that young, he looks even younger in person, he's cute, what would a kid like that do, and other unserious comments. Ignoring the stares and voices, Vikyr continued. I'm sure you've all seen the notice on the north side of the square. For a moment, the crowd's eyes shifted to the north. Sure enough, there it was, a law written on a large banner. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Section 0. Law against tax evasion. Sentence. Kneecap removal greater than. Less than Article 00, Paragraph 0 of the Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville. Law against smuggling. Sentence. Waterboarding greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Paragraph 0. Law against illegal drugs. Sentence. Tongue amputation greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Section 0. Law against embezzlement of munitions. Punishment. Extermination of 3 legs greater than. Less than Constitution of the Autonomous Region of Baskerville, Article 00, Section 0. Law against adultery. Sentence. 600 lashes greater than. Well, they're familiar laws that aren't followed. Laws that are only abstract to the weak who have no money, no power, and no strength. The number of commoners punished by these laws since their inception is unknown, and the number of nobles and noblemen punished is 0, a cold reality. The people's gaze shifted away from the banner and back to Vikyr. Vikyr continued. Those are the laws that have been in place since time immemorial, the very laws that have kept Baskerville's self-governance alive. A small chuckle escaped him. It was a clear mockery of laws that were not being followed, of a justice system that was not being followed except by the rich, powerful, and mighty. But Vikyr did not seek out and punish the laughter. Quote. He simply scanned the public with an indifferent gaze. It was an attitude that lay somewhere between generosity and indifference. Vikyr continued, his voice dry again. The laws of Baskerville still stand, and they will be upheld, despite the change in vice-regent. When Vikyr didn't respond to the audience's jeers, they got a little bolder. PFF'd, of course, yeah, The Chihuahua office manager, who couldn't believe what he was seeing, yelled from the back. You people, what kind of safety do you think you're talking about? This is a man from the Baskerville family. Will it take a blade to slice through his throat to get him to come to his senses? Chihuahua's director is a local official who is well liked by the citizens. So even the people who were booing him craned their necks in recognition. Chet, Mr. Chihuahua is talking over there, let's stop. Gee, I wonder how the director is more charismatic than the deputy director. I'd rather have Mr. Chihuahua be the deputy. Look at that little guy. He can't even respond to the boos without Mr. Chihuahua. The law is about to get even more fucked up. These are reactions that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances, but Vikyr's youthfulness, youthful face, and indifference to the reactions around him allowed them to get away with it. Quote. This time, Vikyr didn't react at all. Even in this atmosphere of being compared to and devalued by his subordinate Chihuahua, Vikyr simply stood there with an expressionless face. The city officials, including Chihuahua's Secretary General, blushed and didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, even the citizens, who were booing at Vikyr's unresponsive behavior, were feeling drained. Maybe he's just a kid, but he can't handle these insults. How can a kid like him be expected to enforce the law? He's just going to let the criminals run rampant, for a while. Gazes of abandonment and resignation, mockery and anger, pity and contempt, were being directed at one Vikyr. And then, Vikyr raised the stick he was holding high. And then, Poof. He drove it straight into the ground. 10 centimeters into the ground. It's pretty heavy, but it's only a small stake. A child could easily pull it out. Question mark. When all the citizens are looking puzzled, Vikir, who had taken a few steps back, spoke up. I am hereby promulgating a new special law under the legislative authority of the Deputy Magistrate. Article 1, Section 1 of the Vikir Special Law. Whoever pulls this stake will be paid 100 million gold in cash. It was as simple as that. Chapter 30 Special Law of Vikir 3. Vikir Special Law, Article 1, Paragraph 1. The person who pulls this stake hereinafter referred to as the stake shall be paid 100 million gold immediately, as determined by Deputy Vikir van Baskerville. A law made and enforced by the young deputy magistrate at the age of 15, upon his first appointment. No one in the legislature objected to this law being made. No one in the legislature objected to the law being enacted, because they had no idea what it was for or what it was intended to do. The citizens looked dumbfounded. What, you're going to give us 100 million? You've got to be kidding me. 100 million gold is 4 years' worth of rust rods for ordinary people. You're offering 100 million for a wooden stick. What's this for, a show? People chattered. They all stare at Vikir with unreadable expressions. And that included Chihuahua Baskerville and other officials from the enforcement division. The chatter only increased slightly, but when no one stepped forward, Vikir spoke again. Anyone else? No one answered the question. By this time, Vikir had picked up his quill and scribbled a few more words on the notice. Vikir's Special Law, Article 1, Section 2. The person who pulls this stake hereinafter referred to as the stake shall be paid an additional 900 million gold, as determined by the Deputy Magistrate, Vikir van Baskerville. 100 million gold and 900 million more. Whoever pulls this stake will be paid 1 billion gold in cash. A billion gold. That's a sum of money that no ordinary man can touch until he dies. The people began to laugh. This is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? What kind of fool would do this? Hey, kid, don't play around, let's go in. This is pretty funny now that I look at it, isn't it some kind of stand-up comedy? The people gathered in the square were stunned by the absurdity of the situation. Some of them even openly call Vikir a clown. But Vikir remains nonchalant. Is anyone here? He asks, and he hears a few laughing responses from around him. The faces of the enforcement officials, including Chihuahua Baskerville, turn bright red. Why is the embarrassment on us? The officials in the back are fidgeting, unable to withstand the taunts of the citizens. Vikir nonchalantly raises his brush. Article 1, Paragraph 3 of the Vikir Special Law. To the person who pulls this stake hereinafter referred to as the stake, there shall be paid an additional 9 billion gold, as determined by the Deputy Magistrate, Vikir van Baskerville. A total of 10 billion. At the mention of this sum, the room fell silent at once. A deathly silence. Whoever pulls this stake will be paid 10 billion gold in cash. Article 3 of the Special Law of Vikir was proclaimed. The stares and sneering taunts are gone, and the central square is silent, as if nothing is alive. The absence of sound, despite the huge crowds of people, gave me chills. Chihuahua Baskerville and all the officials of the executive office were momentarily overwhelmed by the silence on such a massive scale. But Vikir remained nonchalant. Is anyone there? This time, no one answered the question. The citizens stared, unable to laugh or talk. What is this? What's going on? Are you really offering 10 billion? Should we leave? Are you crazy? You know what you'll get if you leave. Look at that knife in his waistband. I don't want to be executed for being a rich bastard. You never know. Why is this young deputy magistrate, who has just been appointed, doing this? No one in the room had any idea why anyone would want to burn 10 billion gold on a stake that anyone could easily pull out. Could it be that the stake is really heavy, so heavy that a normal person can't even pull it out? Not likely. I've seen government employees carrying them around. Hey, don't go out there. They've got something else up their sleeve. In times like this, it's best to stay out of it. It's quiet in the square, with only the occasional shouting match. Quote. Then Vikir picked up his brush again. He was about to create Article 4 of the Special Law. Let me try. From the crowd, a palm the size of a small film rose. It was a girl in shabby clothes, a basket of wilted flowers in her hand. She had a limp, and her face was pockmarked with spots that suggested malnutrition. She raises her hand and steps forward, only to be stopped by a gracious old man. Presumably a neighbor. "Hey, Judy, aren't you Judy? You don't know what you're doing out here." "Grandpa, I'm fine, my mom's sick and I've got to do something, there's no flowers for the bullies these days." "You naive boy, you'll get stabbed if you step in at a time like this. You shouldn't be so ignorant of the world. Hee hee. If anything happens to me, please do me a favor, Mum." Judy stepped out into the square, avoiding the disapproving neighbor's grandfather. Vikyr looked down at Judy with a cold stare. "Pull it out." Judy clutched her hair as tightly as she could. The citizens looked at the little girl with uneasy eyes. Partly pitying, partly mocking, partly intrigued to see what would happen to the poor little thing in the next few seconds. Meanwhile, Judy was breaking out in a cold sweat. "Oh, come on, they're going to have to kill me," she thought. "I've been a laughingstock in public like this, and they're going to have to give me a few bucks. How much would it cost to be a clown in front of so many people? I hope I can get a basket of flowers for it. Then I can take a steaming bowl of meat porridge to my sick mum." Judy stretched out her hand under Vikyr's cold gaze. Her trembling little hand gripped the stake. And then, snap, the stake was pulled out. The stake was light enough to be pulled out with the strength of a girl who hadn't even eaten blood porridge. Quote. Judy was baffled by the ease with which the stake was pulled out. So was the crowd watching, and so were the officials from the enforcement office. "Pulled it. I got it. Pulled it. She's got it." The chatter around me grows louder. What will happen to the girl who pulled the stake now? That was the initial concern, the one that had the crowd gathered here on the edge of their seats. And then, quote. Vikyr raised his hand. He moved his hand to his waistband. It was where the hilt of his sword dangled. Seeing it, Judy squeezed her eyes shut. He's being executed. She didn't know what the crime was, but it was probably some sort of insult to nobility, some sort of insolence, some sort of greed, some sort of vice. In that brief moment, Judy thought of all the people she cared about. Who would take care of her mum if she left like this? Just then, no, a near-terminal scream erupted. A skinny woman burst through the crowd. Her clothes were rags, her body skeletal and skinned, and she looked like she was dying, but somehow she found the strength to pull Judy into her arms and kneel before Vikyr. "My lord, please, please have mercy." Judy's mother. She fell at Vikyr's feet with Judy and began to plead. The lowly dared to be arrogant, not guessing the intentions of the high. "Please forgive me just once, I'm a good child, I'm a good girl, I've survived my father's death, I've fed my sick mother, and I've been selling flowers on the streets day after day, even though I'm sick." The mother began to sob uncontrollably. "Please forgive us, lowly. Things like us don't even dare to be pressed with the blood of your sword. Please turn a blind eye just this once, please." The mother slashed her forehead on the ground, begging for her daughter's life. At her cries, the crowd began to get angry. "Ma, that's good. What did Judy do wrong? There was never another girl in this market as sincere and good as Judy. What did that mother and daughter do wrong? Who are you to persecute Judy when you have the power?" The atmosphere in the square turned nasty. The crowd, which had been as quiet as death, began to boil. The officials, including Chihuahua, shuffle their feet nervously in what looks like a riot at any moment. Then, Vikyr reached for Judy. His hand passed over the hilt of his sword and clutched the leather hilt behind it. Tisk tisk. Vikyr thrust the heavy leather sack in front of Judy's eyes. Judy stares, dumbfounded, at the sack and then at Vikyr's face. Then, with trembling hands, she takes the sack and hands it over. She pulls on the straps of this incredibly heavy leather sack. Pow! A blindingly bright golden glow emanates from within the sack. Gold coins. Countless, countless, countless. For a moment, the room falls silent again. Judy, her mother, the countless others watching the poor mother and daughter, all fell silent in unison. Vikyr spoke. 10 billion gold. The words were like some kind of oracle. Judy and her mother were simply kneeling there, dumbfounded, in front of a sum of money they had never seen, heard, or imagined. And it was the same for everyone watching. This is how the law works. By this time, Vikir had declared to all the citizens filling the square, "It will be upheld."